really best all around. I don't feel it deserved it, especially now that I know A Streetcar Named Desire was up against it. Like, man, I think that if I were one of those directors sitting in the audience, I'd just be like, what? Like, I would be so pissed. It's like this razzle dazzle jazz hands shit beat me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever by my good friend Steve, and this is Every Best Picture, where we are going through every winner of the Best Picture Oscar from Wings right up to the present day. This episode, it's An American in Paris.
Hey, but you know the drill. If you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive, it'd be a great favor to us. Favors the algorithm, gets the show out to more people. We sure would appreciate it. James, let's talk An American in Paris.
And this episode is a special one. We are joined by a guest. She is a filmmaker. She is Laos' first ever female filmmaker, directed Laos' first ever horror movie, Laos' first ever Oscar submission. Mattie Do, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. So good to meet everyone. This is a really rare occasion for me because I never get to talk about other people's movies. So this is going to be fun.
Look at you all dressed up for us.
I did dress up for you guys. I was actually trying to look for something a little bit like Leslie Caron, but I didn't have anything. I wasn't going to wear that whole stupid tuxedo outfit either, with the bow tie.
That's right. Yeah. I know we're not even supposed to get into it. Now that you bring it up, I just thought, wow, people really dressed nice back then.
Oh, yeah. Like my mother-in-law was from she was probably a teenager in the early 60s. Mm-hmm. And she was like, we wore hats and gloves just going out.
Yeah.
Like we didn't do this schlubby thing that everyone does now.
It's like when people used to dress up to get on the airplane. That was it was a big thing. You'd put your suit on for that. But
Pan Am, do you remember? Like girls would put pearls on to get on Pan Am or whatever.
Yeah.
You would wear your Sunday best. For sure. Mm. How are you doing?
Open. Oh, I'm well. Chris just left. He wanted to say hello to you. He misses you. Steve, we've known each other for over a decade now.
Yeah, it's like about 12 years something, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, almost. He has known me. James has known me since I accidentally became a filmmaker. So he and my husband are way back.
This is true. Yes, we met.
For us too.
Oh, if only we could share. If only we could share.
Yeah, so we are doing Vincente Minnelli's 1951 winner, An American in Paris. Now, we asked you to pick a movie. You sort of suggested this one. Would you want to talk us a little bit about why you chose this movie to talk about?
Honestly, I spend a lot of time in Paris myself because as a filmmaker, my editor resides in Paris. So I end up there for months at a time, usually annually. And also it's a ballet film. And I recall that it was really bright and poppy and fun. There was like tap dancing, there was ballet, beautiful sets, but I was super young when I watched it. And I might be a really terrible guest for you because honestly, I hate musicals, you guys. And this is definitely a musical. I despise musicals, but I had these fond memories of this film because when I was young, I had this good friend who was a dancer and cheerleader, and we would have sleepovers almost every weekend. And she loved musicals. She introduced me to My Fair Lady, Cabaret, and of course, this film. And I really had only very vague memories of it. And it was that ballet scene at the very end. There was this huge, epic ballet scenes, costumes, everything. And I thought, well, I saw the list of the Oscar winners that you guys had sent me, and I was like, this is the one. It's a ballet film. I was formerly a ballet dancer before I became a filmmaker. And I was like, this is going to be so fun to revisit. And yeah, so I revisited it.
I mean, it does seem to me that the reason why this film has so much acclaim is chiefly because of that big sort of 17-minute climax, really, where it eschews the plot completely. It gets completely out of the narrative, and it's 44 different sets in 17 minutes, and it's just all the money, right up there on screen, and it's just non-stop dancing, sets, colors, music.
Mhm.
And I get the suspicion that at the time that really just knocked it out of the park, and that's what voters just kind of couldn't really resist. Because I got to be honest, beyond that, I hadn't watched this movie for quite a long time, and I remembered it being better than it was, for want of a better phrase.
Oh, same. I
Well,
mean, I remember it being a lot more fun than it actually was.
I remember thinking right at the beginning, because I'd never seen American Paris before. And some of the Every Best Pictures, Mattie, that we've done, I've seen, and some I hadn't. And some were diamonds in the rough that was like, wow, how could I not have seen this? And others have been, how did this end up being the best picture of that year? And so I love Gene Kelly. And so at the beginning, when it shows him in his little bachelor pad in Paris, and everything is kind of designed to come out of the wall, the bed goes up, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a delight. I'm going to enjoy this movie so much. It's going to be Paris. It's going to be Gene Kelly. It's going to be a bit of love. It's going to be quirky and witty. And that it just kind of wasn't. And we'll get more into that. But I kind of gather we're all heading in the same direction here.
I want to say
Oh
it
my
right out of the gate. Jerry Mulligan, Gene K's character, bit of a dick,
Yeah.
actually.
He's a super dick. He's such
Hello?
a douche. Oh my God, what a creepy little dick. Like, oh, I have so much to say about that. I was actually a little worried that coming on, because like I said, I hadn't seen this since I was a child, right? That and Gene Kelly, he's a legend, you guys. We all
Yes.
know and love Gene Kelly. I was a little bit worried that I was going to come into this being like, Jerry Mulligan sucks, and you guys are going to be like,
Yeah.
like clutch pearls.
I mean, because Nina Fock plays Milo, who's this very together heiress of suntan oil, I want to say, and
Problem too.
she has problems. She seems to be sort of a serial sponsor. She'll take sort of poor, damaged, struggling artists under her wing, and hope that her patronage will transform into romance.
There's a little bit of grooming going on there.
Well, she was a super sugar mama, you guys. I was just like, whoa, what is going on here?
This is true.
It's kind of sad. It's grooming, but it's sad because he's kind of the same. Like he completely forces himself on our main character, Lise, right?
Yes.
So she's forcing herself onto him. They're both treating each other very badly, Milo and Jerry.
Yeah.
And I don't blame her for being super pissed in that scene where he discovers Lise and starts to flirt with her immediately and forces himself basically into like dancing with her and meeting her. I'd be pissed too if I were Milo. But then the way she frames it is like, I brought you on this date. I pay for your meals. I pay for your ride and all of these expenses. And you're so rude. I'm just like, wait, like, yes, legitimately, you should be pissed that he's dropping you while you're his date or like some rando. But you also have a lot of weird, like, weight and burden placed on this too.
Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, they haven't really had a conversation about what the agreement is and what the boundaries of that agreement are. But I don't know, I felt that Jerry really needed to put his foot down first and draw a line and say our relationship is going to be professional before he goes off chasing other women, particularly if he's going to do it right in front of her. He's literally sitting at a table with Milo and he's like got his back to her and he's like leaning over to the other table, basically hitting on Lisa. I'm like, that's not cool in anybody's book. I don't care what your relationship is. Yeah, that's just you being terrible, I think, pretty much.
I watched this with my wife, and she was like, she has said no. Like, she has said no. Back off, man.
Lisa rejected multiple times during that scene, like multiple
Yeah,
times.
absolutely.
Super uninterested in him. But for Milo, like, it was pretty much a date. He was like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a dinner. Of course, he's shocked to find that he's the only guest, right? So, and he's a little bit annoyed that she's trying to get like one-on-one with him, but he knows he's her date because even if there were friends in that circumstance, he was her date. And if I were going out with one of you guys, even just as a friend, I've been married for 15 years now, I would not just be like, ignoring you guys the whole time to speak to someone else. That's rude, no matter how you put it, regardless of the relationship. I wouldn't ditch our table of friends to go dance with this girl and completely like fall off the
Yeah.
conversation and hit on a girl.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think it creates like a problem right from the offset. I think, this is supposed to be our lovable hero, and we learn that he's a GI, he was a GI, and that he's a service veteran, and all of these other things which are let's say inherently good and are supposed to sort of warm us to him. And then immediately, his behavior is just kind of like this. And it's like, this is going to be a real struggle for me to like get on board with whatever his struggles are going to be if this is the guy that we're dealing with.
I sensed something else from someone who has lived in Paris for work and who has, I'm a fairly international human being. I sensed entitlement. He's such a basic dude. He's not talented. His paintings suck. His paintings are like, he once passed by like Dufry's paintings, Raoul Dufry's paintings, and decided to like make an imitation of it and sell it on the street. And he's doing that whole like, I'm an American living in Europe, like study abroad, that went back home life. And he just thinks that what I dislike about the film is that he feels like the world revolves around him, and then he has these little kids vying around him, singing with him for bubblegum. And he has his little expat friends and that one French friend that loves the expats more than the Frenchies.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think I read it a little bit more that way.
Being an expat, there is a feeling of, I'm not going to be special in my hometown because my paintings are so-so. I've so-so talent, but in Paris, being an American, I stand out. There's a certain speciality. I'm interesting to people, and it probably feeds that sense of narcissism.
Well, there's that acronym here, FILTH, which is failed in London, trying Hong Kong. And
that's amazing. I love that.
Which is obviously horrible, but at the same time, he does have that kind of sort of laissez-faire sensibility that like, I'm existing outside of the lines, outside of society. I can create my own reality almost. I'm just living that bohemian post-war utopian existence where I can walk the streets, do what I like, hit on any girl that I like. Everybody knows me, but I am not beholden to anybody. That's kind of the way it's almost like, that expat idyll, if you like, where I'm just like, I'm above it all and I can just float around, and then you just realize, ew,
no consequences,
Oh yeah.
It's a non-existent dream because Parisians don't like American expats in any time period. Even back then, they didn't love that attitude. And so it's like this one TV series that I've actually never watched, so I probably shouldn't compare it, but I'm gonna. It reminds me a little bit of that Emily in Paris thing, but like Jerry Mulligan is in Paris. So out of touch,
What I was going to ask is, though, obviously we all have a problem with almost the Me Too elements in this movie, and yet this won the Best Picture in 1951. So people were drawn to this film. Are our sensibilities changed in 2024 to the point where we look at this interaction and we find it really off-putting, but a 1951 audience found it endearing?
I mean, yes.
I would say yes, 100%. I mean, romance defined then and romance defined now is completely different. You want that manly man back then that will like push himself on you and like what we would now call like assault.
How charming. Yes.
Or harassment. We would call it now harassment.
If she says no, you just keep forcing yourself on her until she says yes.
Yes.
You show up at her place of work without notice. Like what? That's creepy.
Very.
That was a romantic.
Well, that's what Americans call making America great again.
Oh. Okay. I mean, let's move on to
the GI. That's very masculine and handsome and very ideal protagonist quality, right? But now, like, if you think about a GI, you think about war crimes. So, like, it is different, Steve. I think it is.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
want to talk about sort of the manliness or otherwise of Gene Kelly
Mhm.
himself, because you know there is something incredibly sort of handsome about it, and obviously he's incredibly physical, and he's incredibly athletic and all the rest of it. But there's also that kind of, what from today's point of view, there's a kind of sort of stigma attached to the song and dance man. You
Mhm.
know that he might swing the other way or whatever, and there's something about his it's such a sort of bubbly screen persona. It's all smiles, it's jazz hands, it's the high trousers, and the way that the tap dance and ballet choreography, there's a loose, I don't know if it's specific to Gene Kelly, but there's a way that he dances where it's like everything from the waist up is kind of loose and kind of hanging down. It's like he does nothing with his arms at all while he's dancing, and it's obviously a choice and a style and a part of the choreography. And we should point out that Gene Kelly did all the choreography for this
Wow.
movie as well. But I wonder what your kind of take on sort of the screen persona of Gene Kelly was, and how you sort of see him and interpret that.
Well, that kind of for dance, that kind of like lax sort of not huge gestures from waist up, almost hanging, almost was considered manly for dance, you know? It's like the man doesn't have to try as hard. He has to show his strength in what his bravado is all in his like legs. He jumps
Mhm.
high, he can do tricks, and he can do what we like say like multiple beats and kicks in the air. But then like what's happening on the upper body is just like, yeah, I'm just like, this is just coming out like nothing, you know?
Mm,
It's no effort, it's low effort. Whereas when you look at Lise, her dancing is incredible, but she was a ballerina when they
She was,
recruited
yeah.
her. And she has very full movement. She's very gracious with her whole body, through her like upper body, her neck, her fingertips, and it's very sensual. And so she's very much objectified as this like thing to get, whereas he, as this like casual, lazy man, expects for it to fall onto his lap, kind of, you know? And so that was
Mhm.
considered quite manly back then. But you're right, like now, modern day song and dance man could go either way, especially if you're a dancer. Like,
for sure. I mean, I don't think I've seen a huge number of Gene Kelly's movies, beyond this and Singing in the Rain, and I'm not sure I've seen much, but I'm always struck by his his whole persona, his whole sort of screen image, and how kind of sort of casual and effortless and sort of a cheeky chappy almost that he is. And I just find the whole thing sort of kind of interesting. It is very attractive in one way, but there is a kind of deliberate sort of effortlessness to it all that
it's
I think I see.
unrecognizable. It'll come to me. Like I don't need to try, and it makes it's supposed to be even more attractive because it's that effortless and because it's that lackadaisical. And it was also a way of movement for that time too, because like everything was very jazzy, and it was the music of Gershwin, who had passed
Right.
away a few years before they optioned the music, all of his music. And Gershwin was a jazz master. You know, he did Gollywog's Cakewalk, he did Rhapsody in Blue, and you hear that in this score, which is actually an American in Paris, where it starts out very playful and very staccato almost, and almost like a little chasing, titillation. But then all of a sudden there's these great swells towards a climax, which Rhapsody in Blue also had. And Gershwin was known for that. And it sort of matched that time period of dancing, which I think we should get onto this subject later as well, about like not just the music and style of dance, but what he was portraying in that number with oh, whose paintings were did they belong to? I can't remember the name of the artist, but the painting itself was Chocolat,
Mm.
and it was a black man who was dancing kind of like minstrel style almost, and he was actually portraying in the same costume that character, and that form of dancing for jazz and tap came from
Mhm.
black people, and it was this like effortless, you know, high stepping. I don't need to try because they're making fun of rich people who, well, they don't have to do anything and everything falls in their lap.
Yeah, I know. So a lot that whole sort of final section, it's every setup is sort of drawn from a different sort of sketch on the street or on someone's easel or something like that, isn't it? And it incorporates a number of sort of different artistic styles that are then reinterpreted through dance. I mean, we might as well get into it now,
Okay, let's do
actually.
it.
But you're going to have to take us by the hand, I think, a little bit
Oh,
here.
I will take you by the hand. So one of the things I actually still, I didn't remember this as a child. I just remember that the sets were epic and they were so creative. A lot of them were like hand drawn, hand painted, and they were like being wheeled around, and there were all these seamless set changes that ballet scene takes us through. And then as I got older, I realized, oh, these are actual famous artists, French artists, that he's kind of paying homage to. And it starts out, at the fountains, which, oh, whose work is that? I want to say that that is Raoul Dufy's work in the very beginning. And the color scheme, the palettes are very much just like that. And he's literally pulling images and putting them on the set, and they're dancing through it, and he's bringing to life characters from these paintings. And I think my favorite one had to be like when he entered the little garden, the floral shop scene, where it was like the courtyard filled with roses and flowers. And that was definitely Renoir. Definitely 100% Renoir. He even has this woman in blue with his giant straw hat walking down the staircase. And she is from this Renoir painting where she's standing in like a field of wheat or something. And the flowers.
Oh, I know the one. Yes, yes.
You know what I'm talking about? The blue
I know
dress,
the painting. I know the painting that you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. And so he's like pulling these things. And I thought, this is a super abstract dance number, but at the same time, it's taking me through all these generations of famous painters. And I just have to kind of laugh about it now, now that I'm watching it as an adult, because Jerry Mulligan envisions himself amongst these people. Like he's entered his own sketch, like at the end of that black and white ball, right? He has entered mentally his own sketch, imagining what it would be like if he could be with Lise and if they could have this like epic romantic dance through Paris together. And he's putting himself on the same status as these artists like Renoir and Dufy and Lautrec,
Yeah, I was going to say Toulouse-Lautrec's the one that I definitely recognize, with who used to do all the Can-Can girls from the Moulin Rouge and stuff, didn't he?
The Moulin Rouge with the Can-Can girls. You're right, because they had the whole like reddish rust-colored dresses with the ruffles going past the Moulin Rouge. Actually, it might have been him. I believe Chocolat was by
possibly.
I believe. And then he had it was supposed to be Van Gogh, but it wasn't very recognizable as Van Gogh. But my favorite besides Renoir was also it had the beautiful fake leaves, like the very jungle background scenes with the girls in the stripes. That was so beautiful. I still remember the stripy costumes. And I can't remember which artist that was.
No, there were so many so quickly. It was what, like 44 changes in 17 minutes or something like that. So
I heard that it took weeks to film, like weeks to film.
It cost $500,000 to produce just that sequence, which obviously at that time, in like 1950 or whatever, is just an insane amount of money. And that's why I think I mentioned it at the beginning, is I suspect that that's kind of what won voters over, was this the sheer visual and technological audacity of that
spectacle.
Yeah, it was impossible to ignore.
I mean, there wasn't really anything like that at the time, was there?
Not really. I mean, the one thing that it reminded me of, particularly that sequence, is the red shoes. Steve and I have been talking a little bit about Powell and Pressburger lately. We watched The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp recently, and we're going to get on to the red shoes, outside of this specific series. But that it does the same thing, where it's this transformative sequence from outside the theater to inside, so you're actually inside the play and inside the ballet, and then that becomes a whole thing far bigger and more opulent than the space could possibly contain. And it's like quite a sort of magical sequence,
almost like a drug-fueled dream sequence. I would have believed it if like Harry Mulligan had smoked something off and entered that.
I did mention that to my wife while we were watching that. I was thinking, this would be better on mushrooms. I think it was if I hadn't thought about Jerry actually consuming something and then because it was visually stunning. I had no idea it was
Yeah.
going to keep going as like I was unfamiliar with the movie and I kept thinking, what's happening here? This is going on for a long time.
Mm.
You know, where does this land?
It also reminded me of that sequence in Singing in the Rain. You know, towards
Uh,
the sort of in the sort of second half of Singing in the Rain, there's this whole sort of interlude where they kind of just go off on one, and the whole story is completely jettisoned, and they just do this sort of running, singing, dancing montage for about sort of 15, 20
Really?
minutes. Yeah, and then you're just kind of like, oh yeah, we have a story to tell. Let's get back to that.
well, that's one of my critiques of this is, I'm a big on the story and the narrative of the plot in this. And this seems like just an excuse for really, I mean, arguably very stunning. Like I said, I'm a Gene Kelly fan and everything that Maddie's just suggested. I enjoy it, but I'm much more of a movie story guy. And so
Mhm.
I think that's why when I came to the end of this, especially when they kind of did, in my opinion, a poor man's Casablanca love triangle at the end, where I can't marry you, Rick, because you know this guy took care of me when I was younger, and I owe him, kind of the whole Ingrid Bergman
Oh,
relationship.
gross.
And then in the end, Casablanca goes where he doesn't get the girl. When the whole musical montage ends, the door opens up. Basically, she gets sent out of the car and she runs up to him. I actually was disappointed. I didn't want them to end up together. And
No.
Yeah, I'm not sure he deserved it, and it misses out that whole obviously very important conversation between her and Henri. Is it
right,
the guy that she's with? They get in the car, and then there's after the montage, she just gets out of the car, and you're like, well, hang on, that
yeah.
must have been an awkward
It's
conversation,
super
surely.
awkward. It's super awkward because like she feels obligated to marry Henri because she's his ward and
Mhm.
he took care of her after she was orphaned during the war, right, in the 40s. And so she feels obligated. I do feel he is very much in love with her, but there's a little bit of like weird Stockholm shit going on
Yeah.
there.
Well,
And
we
it's
mentioned
very
we mentioned
awkward.
grooming. That's some
Yeah.
Yeah.
serious grooming. He's like, oh, I liked her ever since she was a little girl, and I just had to wait it out. It's
Yeah.
like, ew.
Yeah.
She was
Okay.
Mhm.
pretty young when she went to be with him. And that's the thing is like all of these dudes are significantly older than all the women that they're involved with. And so Milo's grooming Jerry and then like Anthony is grooming her, grooming Lise. And it's like super awkward, I find.
Well,
And
Yeah.
once
I
you're
suppose
beholden,
the silver lining is that they both escape from their groomers and they find love elsewhere, I suppose. But
we don't really know what happens to Milo, right? Like who fucking knows? Maybe she goes after Adam, the pianist, next.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I thought was going to happen.
He's
Actually,
the
I
best
assumed okay,
character. Yeah, he was the most normal character in the whole film, actually.
he needs a patron. He needs someone
Yeah,
to actually sort
he
of
was
pay his
really
way.
good. I loved watching him. Yeah, it was
He
actually
was
quite
very
good.
much the Freddie Miles from in this film. You know what I mean? Like the Freddie Miles friend character in the film from what is it? The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what Adam was. But even Lise going to Jerry, I felt unsatisfied with it because
Oh,
I'm sure
absolutely.
that in the 50s it was like this epic love story, but the way he basically forced himself on her and the way he was playing Milo on the side, and there's nothing inherently special about him. Nothing inherently special. He's not even that handsome because he's significantly older than her. I can't believe I just said that Gene Kelly's not that handsome, but really,
Yeah, I
like
was.
he's
I
significant.
gotta.
He
Yeah,
can
I
do
was gonna.
better.
I was gonna say, Maddie, I hear a lot of the critiques of this film, but I wouldn't go so far as to say Gene Kelly's not a handsome man.
Not she can do better is all I'm saying. Like she can do
Absolutely.
better. And
Well,
it's
yeah,
the thing
maybe
that
someone just a little more age appropriate. She's like half his age.
Mhm.
He's like 21, 22, and he's 40. And it's kind of like, okay. But hey, that's
See,
Hollywood for you. So,
well, speaking of Hollywood and she can do better, one of the big things about this film winning the award was how, like, every time she was interviewed, everyone would come up to her and be like, "Oh my God, what an opportunity that was for you! Wasn't that amazing? Like, you got discovered. How did you feel wearing those extravagant costumes? They were all so beautiful." And she was just like, "Why is everyone acting like this was such a big deal for me? Like, yeah, it was cool that Gene Kelly found me in my ballet company and asked me to do this, but like I was already touring the world. I was already a well-known dancer in a very famous ballet company. I forget who the choreographer was, but the director is like someone super famous in the ballet world.
Mm.
And she was like, I had Dior design ballet costumes for us. Like I'm Dior costumes. Like this was like not that exciting. Like wasn't that exciting. And I just thought, wow, real life Lise Leslie had a total like Jerry Mulligan facing her with this whole like, aren't we so special? We Americans, we're so special. And you feel special being a part of us, right? Like she had to face that in real life.
This scene feels like a good moment to move over to the Oscars itself and look at sort of does it stand the test of time, and does it deserve its place in Oscar history, which are two questions that we like to pose to the movie when we've sort of revisited and when we've had a look. So
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess which way you guys are going on this.
Yes,
well,
I'm so curious because I was not prepared for that question. I didn't do my due diligence and listen to your other podcasters.
Okay.
So, yes, Steve.
So this was the 24th Academy Awards. So it's 1952, early 52. And it was not the big front runner going in at all. A Streetcar Named Desire, Marlon Brando, Vivian Leigh had like 12 nominations going in and was far and away the front runner.
Streetcar Named Desire?
Yeah. That version of it as well. And A Place in the Sun had 9 nominations. So American in Paris came in with 8. It was looking okay. But then on the night, A Streetcar Named Desire ended up winning 4 awards, including all three acting awards except Best Actor. Marlon Brando missed out on the Best Actor award because they decided to give it to crusty old Humphrey Bogart. Probably the last chance they could have given him one for The African Queen instead, which it's nice, but it's not
a good one. It's a
but
but
it does feel like one of those, we better give him one before, or else we're never going to give him one. It's like Al Pacino winning for Scent of a Woman or something like that. It's like you shouldn't have got it for this. And the mentality was that Marlon Brando will have an opportunity to win again, and of course he did. Yeah. Just 3 years later, he won for On the Waterfront. But yeah, so in the Best Picture category that year, there was Streetcar Named Desire, A Place in the Sun, Quo Vadis, Decision Before Dawn, which I don't remember at all. But then American in Paris won out, and it does seem to be that the spectacle ultimately eclipsed one of the great dramas of the period, and then everything else that it won was technical. Beyond that, it ended up with about 8 awards, but it was all it lost out on Best Director, but then it won Best Story, Art Direction, Cinematography, Costume Design, Editing. Oh no, it lost editing, Score, and then Gene Kelly won an honorary Oscar, and it was the only Oscar that he would win, but it was basically given to him for the fact that he
contributions
that he did the choreography and the acting and everything. It was just like, well done, unquantifiable achievement in movie making, and it would be the only Oscar he would ever win.
It just seems weird that going off of the year before, All About Eve, which you and I, James, agreed was a masterpiece film.
Yeah.
So nuanced, so witty, incredible screenplay, that it's almost like a 180 to come over to suddenly go with An American in Paris.
Yeah, they've gone for the sheer razzle dazzle spectacle over something with great performances, great dialogue, great writing, great direction. It's a complete 180. And so, I mean, I think clearly Streetcar Named Desire is the film that has probably stood the test of time best from that year.
I didn't know against that it was up against a Streetcar Named Desire. And already I felt like I'm a little bit surprised that this was an Oscar winner, but I didn't know what it was up against because I didn't, like I said, I didn't research that time period, 51 or 52, 1952. But I have to say, like, okay, like the spectacle, it's something no one's ever seen before. It was quite abstract, like the Red Shoes. Red Shoes is very experimental and surreal. And you see her floating down, you're like, whoa, that's so crazy. Even now, if you were to see that, you're like, that's a really crazy idea. But that doesn't mean best picture. And I'm fine with the whole like honorary Oscar award, because I see that like even though Vincente was the one who directed it, obviously Gene Kelly put a lot of work into it with Vincente Minelli, and that he like choreographed it, and I'm sure he helped with like a lot of the composition. I see like awards for art direction or like costume, but really best all around, I don't feel it deserved it, especially now that I know A Streetcar Named Desire was up against it. Like, man, I think that if I were one of those directors sitting in the audience, I'd just be like, what? Like, I would be so pissed. It's like this razzle dazzle jazz hands shit beat me. And the thing is, like, the love story wasn't even great. And, let's jump back to that time period. Contextually, okay, Gene Kelly was ultra desirable, ultra famous. Sappy love stories were a big thing. But again, A Streetcar Named Desire was up against it. And the acting was like, I had heard something where people, musical apologists were saying that this movie is legendary because people look down on musicals and it won an award and it like achieved something for the genre of film for musicals. But at the same time, it's not that I look down on musicals per se. I don't personally like them. But when you think about just the characters, Lisa falls in love with Jerry for reasons,
Because
and
he won't let
Corey,
her not, basically.
exactly. And Jerry is special because other reasons. It doesn't
Right.
make sense that this would have gotten Best Picture to me, And like I said, I don't mind that Gene Kelly got that honorary Oscar, because I do think that a lot of work went into it and he was incredible. But costume, production design, not Best Picture.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the art direction I kind of like. I mean, obviously you've got that entire sort of 17-minute bit at the end, but there was also, do you remember the song "I'll Build a Stairway to Paradise"? Where like either
Yes.
side of the stairways, there are like these chandeliers made out of women, on
Yeah.
either
It
side.
was
And I was kind of
wild.
like, that's some pretty crazy. I don't even know if that counts as choreography, if that counts as set decoration or whatever. You've got
What is
actual
that?
human beings kind of ingrained into the mise en scène there. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah, they're going all out. This is pretty
Like
impressive.
this diamonds, like Marilyn Monroe's diamonds, except for a dude.
Pretty much, yeah. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, no, maybe it was that. Maybe it was indirectly they were trying to show their love of Gershwin, their respect to Gershwin. It was his entire songbook being translated onto the big screen properly.
Music,
So, I mean,
but not
the,
Best Picture, not Best Picture.
yeah, I mean, it's sometimes the motivations for people doing this and for people voting for these movies isn't immediately obvious. Once we're removed 60, 70 years from it, and I can understand or believe that there might have been a conversation around, oh yeah, but this is just our way of showing our love of Gershwin, or our love of Minelli, or our love of Gene Kelly. He's not even nominated for Best Actor, so a vote for the movie is a vote for Gene Kelly, perhaps.
Right now, we don't even know what it is that goes into the films that get awarded at the Oscars. Of course, there's like that whole for your consideration voting and etc. But there are times where I'm just like, how much is politically at play here amongst the candidates? You know what I mean?
Well, exactly that. Exactly that. I mean, you look at all of the different conversations that go swirling around all of the nominees. How often is it? And this is why we like to talk about this as much as the films themselves, is how much of it is how often does the best film win, really? And how often are those decisions swayed by, we need more representation, or there's been a backlash against that filmmaker for something else, or that guy's already won, or she's already won, or it's her time, and all this kind of stuff.
Time. Somebody's
Right.
on track. Right.
That when you see it in writing 20 years later, 30 years later, you're just kind of like, oh, really? Okay. I don't understand why that would have won. But at the time, it was a whole other conversation that was going on.
2005 crash over Brokeback Mountain, man. Come
There you
on.
Well, I think
What was
even in the
that?
moment there, they didn't get it, did they? When Jack Nicholson opened the envelope and he was like, "Crash,"
And the
really?
Oscar goes to Crash.
Oh, is that what happened? Really?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he seemed confused when he opened the envelope.
You go look at it on
Perplexed.
YouTube. Jack Nicholson
Yeah.
announcing the Best Picture winner. He's like, "It's
It's
yeah.
like, really? Are you kidding me?
Like An American in Paris was like different for its time too. Like we hadn't really seen films like that. And at that time, that was like, whoa. And I imagine at the time in American in Paris, it was like that too, where it's like, holy cow, like we just have 17 minutes of no dialogue at all. Not even singing, like this
Yeah.
musical, not even singing, just abstract dancing. Though every time I think of it now, it's like, though Red Shoes did do it. Red Shoes did it. And it was
You
much
know,
weirder.
there's
Well,
also
it
a
was
thought
much-
too. Maddie, one of the things whenever we talk about what the place in Oscar history or maybe some of the other movies it was up against is trying to put ourselves in the mindset of where, particularly in this time period, Americans would be in their thought process. And we're, during the World War II years, what were Americans going through and what were they wanting to see in their cinema and the stories that were being told? So it makes you wonder if in 1950, 51, you've got a post-war America that is looking for something lively and spectacle-y and kind of celebrates Americanness with one of its allies in a romantic city in Paris. It just makes me wonder, what was the average film goer in 1951 hoping to see when they went into a cinema?
I can see that because as an American, not just the people who selected it for the awards, but the audience and the people who created the film, it could be very much that. Like 5 years ago, we just came out of like one of the worst wars of our lives, right? And Americans kind of swooped in at the end because the war had been going on with or without the Americans' allyship or help for quite a while. And then at the very end, the Americans came in and then kind of walked around and been like, we won it for y'all, even though like they didn't. And this film kind of reflects that. It kind of reflects that, like, look at me, the big American hero, and how much Frenchies love me. Like the French people love me. The French kids adore me. The French girls can't resist me. And it very much reflects that sort of sentiment, right? Whereas I don't know if this is true, but I had heard that the film did not get accepted or do well for in France itself, not only because the depictions are very inaccurate of French people, but because people who were coming out just thought that in terms of relationships between America and France, this is not something that they wanted to promote or accept. But I'm not sure, like, I would have to research on that a little bit more, but I heard that the film was not that well loved on the European side.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do. There was a lot of stereotypes there.
Does this movie stand the test of time?
Does it deserve its place in Oscar history?
I think that last 17 minutes is still pretty impressive for what it is. But beyond that, I think it's all pretty forgettable and quite crude and insensitive to a modern audience.
Maddie,
I
what
think
say
that-
you? You're our guest. Yeah.
I think that crude and insensitive, those are all great words, but I found the main story and the characters all rather fluffy and super forgettable. And I also found I found this to be kind of like a fever dream of one man's perception of himself as an American outside of his country, which is very funny because at the end credits there's a title card that says this film was made in Hollywood, USA, as if to like even show you we didn't even have to go to Paris to make this movie. Like we need Paris, we can imitate Paris on our sets. And I think that it does not withstand the test of time. But I agree with James in that scene, as well as Lisa's solo, how she's perceived by Henri as the ideal woman, those two scenes are great.
I meant to raise that earlier, Matt. I'm glad you circled back to that because I actually enjoyed that more than the last 17 minutes. I thought that was genuinely creative, although it did kind of highlight something you mentioned earlier about objectifying her. She obviously is the object in these man's desires. But leaving that aside, I thought it was done very creatively and it showed her immense talent. I enjoyed that scene probably, like I said, much more than the end scene.
Yeah, because there
That's
is
why
that
it's
sequence when Henri is first talking about her. He's like, "Oh, I've met this girl and she's great," and you get
Yes.
those flashes to her, and she does that dance with the chair. And apparently, that sequence she got in real trouble, or the movie got in real trouble with the censors, with the Hays Code, because it was deemed far too sexy. This scene where she's literally just straddling a chair, and she was like, apparently, she just kind of said, "Well, what can I do with a chair?" And
She-
the
We
Hays
could ask
Code saw in it.
JD Vance that. We could ask JD Vance what you could do with a chair, and he'd answer.
Oh, there you go. On that
I'm
note,
joking.
on that note, yes, I think we're going to draw this to a close. Maddie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you,
If
Maddie.
any of our viewers want to find out more about your work and contact you on social media, where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram if they want to see pictures of my dogs and my cats, because that's usually what I use social media for, just post pictures of my animals. But when I do have film work, it does, I do talk about it sometimes there, and that is mango sodium, as in like the fruit and NaCl. I have a Twitter, but I don't really know how to use it. So same name, mango sodium. And that's pretty much it. Like, I'm not a very social media active human being. That's a lie. I'm a very social media active human being. Every day you're going to see another picture of one of the animals that I raise rent free. But I'm not one of these people who like really puts myself out there.
Where are your films? Are any of your films on sort of Netflix or anything like that at the moment?
You can find my films on Shudder, shudder.com, which is a genre horror only streaming platform. Very fun. And you can also find, depending on the country you're in, on Amazon, Apple, and also Netflix. But I believe Netflix is mainly in Asia that you can find my films, mainly in Southeast Asia.
And I
Okay,
heartily
great.
recommend people do so. They are good.
I'm going to check it out. I'm going to check out. Absolutely.
They are not ballet oriented like an American in Paris.
No.
Not yet. Not yet. Have you got anything in the pipeline that you can talk about?
I do. Well, I'm working on 3 different films right now, and there's a horror film, straight up monster creature feature about expats, just like Jerry Mulligan.
You almost said just like you, didn't you? I know. Yeah.
Just like you,
No,
just like
just
you
like
two,
you.
just like you two.
You monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, the expat is definitely the monster in this creature feature. Two expat films, and one that takes place in Bangkok and Laos about how expat women form a bond between each other without having very much in common, and how that can come out to, consequences that are not positive or beneficial. A lot of people die. And I'm working on trying to have a ballet film, but that's a lot larger scope, because to have a ballet film you have to have the sets and you have to have the dancers, and that's something that's like maybe way in the long run. So lots going on for me.
Have you thought of mixing the genres and having a horror ballet film?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, almost all of my films are thriller or horror or supernatural. So far in my career, I've only considered a non-thriller, non-horror film once in my life. And otherwise, everything else is in that genre. So if I say I'm thinking about doing a ballet film, or I'm thinking about doing a talking dog film, it's going to be in that genre.
Okay. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Okay, Maddie, thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank everybody for watching. Please let us know your thoughts on American in Paris down below. I mean, do you think it stands the test of time? Gene Kelly, handsome or not handsome? Do let us know, and where you stand on Gershwin and the objectivity of women in musical cinema. We want to hear about it all.
Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.
You ought to be in pictures.
pictures, oh, what a hit you would be.